And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. It's great to have Robert Malone, who I'm sure is in increasing demand. I'm sure it never ends, the media treadmill. Robert, always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Peter. And it's my pleasure. Of course, I consider you a friend, a colleague, and a key opinion leader in the context of the UK. So thanks for having me on.
Well, I feel we should end the interview at that point then. That should be enough, Robert, but we will continue and find out what has been happening stateside. And of course, R.W. Malone MD is your handle, and PsyWar is your latest book out. I think end of August it was out, and we did an interview a couple of months ago around that, and the links are all in the description. A lot's been happening. Let me ask a general question. Do you think are politicians able or even wanting to stop taking money from Big Pharma? Obviously, RFK, which we'll touch on, in his grilling, he was being accused, I think, of being the only politician who hadn't. I think that was the accusation. It was all quite confusing.
Bernie Sanders. Talk about a cell phone.
So confusing. But no, this thing that politicians are bought off by different industries, and Big Pharma being one of the big ones, is it possible for that to change?
I guess my answer is that's up to the voters. And the current thinking among those that are grappling with this problem, and for most, it's just it's like the shrubbery around the quad in DC. It just is part of the landscape, and that's the way things are. Or the Smithsonian, it just exists, and there's nothing to be done about it. So for those that are thinking about it, one approach is to cut off the milk supply, metaphorically, for pharma, and that having to do with the television advertising, which many in the UK would find shocking. It is ubiquitous, as are a variety of kind of surreptitious secondary advertising techniques, particularly for food. So a lot of broadcasting incorporates product placement of various types as surreptitious advertising, and then we have the overt advertising, and then we have pharma is so awash in money that they don't really need to advertise for sales so much as to advertise for co-optation of a particular media outlet. So you basically, I was referring to mother's milk. It may not be the best metaphor, but so long as that stream of incentives exist, then particularly in the modern era of what my wife calls dead media, bless her heart, or corporate media or mainstream media or the trusted news initiative sources, or choose your language, they are in an increasingly tenuous position in terms of cash flow and finances. And so they really can't tolerate a major loss of revenue in the United States. And it was another one of those strange surreptitious tells when CNN came out with an article to the effect that major news outlets might have to cease operations if there was a decision to stop the pharmaceutical industry television advertising policies, which, by the way, were spearheaded by, drumroll, rimshot, Senator Edward Kennedy, historically, as part of I once had a visit from a journalist from Switzerland. And of course, the Swiss are very sensitive to things relating to the pharmaceutical industry for obvious reasons that won't escape people in the UK. And so this particular gentleman, Francois Delier, as I recall, a French Swiss, told me that the history was that there was a quid pro quo between Novartis Corporation headquarters and the senator, in which there was a commitment for Novartis to place large corporate facilities / headquarters in Boston as a quid pro quo for Kennedy's support of pharmaceutical industry advertising. So this is the kind of stuff that goes on in the States all the time. I'm sure it absolutely doesn't occur in the UK. You're clean as a whistle, and there's absolutely no corruption. But it definitely occurs in the United States. Is there prospect? So one of the things that is being floated right now, because now the pharmaceutical television advertising and that whole revenue source has been codified into federal law, consequent to some acts of Congress. So that means that Bobby can't wave a magic wand and make this all go away. If it's a congressional act, it basically, it's like the law. Once you have if you're relying on case law, once that case is out there, it doesn't matter if it was 1659, it still can get cited. And that's the British system. And so likewise with congressional acts, it's just wicked hard to even get them amended, let alone rescinded. So we're kind of stuck with it. And one of the strategies that's being floated is that there be requirements for pharmaceutical ads to include a cost component. So when they're pitching you and showing you pictures of an elderly couple sitting side by side in bathtubs looking out over the lake and smiling at each other knowingly, as a advert for Viagra, for example, they would have to say, and these tablets cost X, Y, and Z dollars. So that's right at the margins, and that's considered a radical proposal here in the States. So that kind of tells you about the state of play.
Download the Getter app right now. It's totally free. It's where I put up exclusively all of my content 24 hours a day. You want to know what Steve Bannon's thinking? Go to Getter.
So don't wait. Download the Getter app now.
Sign up for free and be part of the movement.
Let me ask you about one of your recent posts on your Substack, which is then a promo for your Substack, was, I think it was the 1st of September, Big Pharma's advertising blitz, billions on TV ads, medical education and lobbying. And that was, I think, a cross post from Trial Site News.
Right.
And that's a fantastic read because, as you said, I've been, whenever I turned on a TV in a hotel room in the US for one of the first times, and the adverts for these drugs, majority of the advert was reading out the side effects as opposed to actually the benefits. And you don't want a headache tablet if it's going to possibly kill you. That wouldn't be a good outcome, but they read them.
Or cause your children to have autism. Oh, I didn't say that.
No, and we'll touch on that. But this advertising blitz, and it's a fantastic article because it delves into and explains how this whole industry works, and how I guess the legacy media is connected so closely to Big Pharma.
So there's a whole discipline in this. And during COVID, I was right on the threshold of getting board certified in this. And it just, the tide of events of COVID overcame me, and I never finished my board certification. I was like one test away. It's called medical affairs. And it's a discipline like regulatory affairs, and most pharmaceutical industry firms have medical affairs specialists. And what it focuses on is the body of law that regulates pharmaceutical industry communications with physicians and patients in large extent, and packaging, labeling, all that stuff that has to do with marketing and communications. And to my eye, as you know, I'm not board certified, but I play one on television, I guess, and was almost there. A lot of what's going on violates the law. but nobody's enforcing it. So that is a bona fide domain that, say, the Make America Healthy Again action group might advocate for. And by way of full disclosure, I'm a medical advisor to MAHA Action, in addition to my other various roles and responsibilities these days. So it's something that Marty McCarty's FDA could certainly take on instead of harassing Amish farmers for selling whole milk, just to take one example.
Tell me, you touched on it a little bit at the very beginning, but I watched some of the footage of the Senate hearings, and
Bless your heart.
I know, but we've had Nigel Farage over there speaking with some positivity. We've had RFK speaking, and it really, I mean, it has to come with a health warning of watching that, because it is infuriating.
Mental health warning.
It does. But what are the purpose of, for your audience, half UK, half US? What is the purpose of these here? Is it just showmanship?
Okay. So that's something that I've been talking about. As I mentioned to you in the pre-call, I've been doing interviews since 7 a.m. this morning, and I've got a stack of them, reaching in well into next week, all around this topic area. And all of the initial commentary that I've seen, including from social media influencers that I respect, like Vigilant Fox, that's done some great coverage, they're focusing on kind of the blow by blow, he said, she said, who's winning. It's kind of you could think of it as kind of tennis match or football game type coverage. Who's winning, who's losing, who's making points. Let's step back from that. Start off, and let's take kind of a little bit of a PsyWar point of view on this. So from a psychological warfare propaganda perspective, how do you approach an event like this? How do I approach it? Well, first thing I determined, like when I had to listen to that depressing thing starting at about 9 p.m. last night, because my day was so busy and I had to start my hits at 7 in the morning. First thing I watch for or listen for is who are the audience, what are the target audiences, and what are the subtexts? And then from that, what are the tactical and strategic approaches that are being pursued? And in the case of the majority of the Republicans, except for those that are basically rhinos aligned, this is Americanism, Republicans in name only is the acronym, that are aligned with the Democrat Party on the topic that you alluded to of the pharmaceutical industry. And notoriously in this recent exchange, Bernie Sanders said the secret out loud that both D and R all take pharma money, with few exceptions.
I know he admitted it.
Right? Yeah, it was out in the open. Bless his heart. Confirming that he is getting a little long in the tooth, to use a metaphor that anybody that deals with rodents would understand, or horses. So what was going on here beyond the blow by blow of he said, she said? Let's start off with who are the intended audiences and what is the subtext or context for that. The only thing that matters right now is the upcoming midterms. Everything that's going on right now is all about the upcoming midterm elections. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Trump's support of, let's call it the Israeli Defense Force actions, I'm trying to be neutral, has alienated a key part of his electoral bloc from the from the last presidential election, which is the younger cohort. In general, the enthusiasm level of the younger age cohort that had voted for Trump is diminished significantly over the Israeli conflict. So that weakens the situation, and you have, as within the United States, arguably the most powerful grassroots movement in current era is the Make America Healthy Again movement, and it played a significant role in the electoral rout of the Democrat Party in the last election. So that translate that to political speak, it means that if you are a Democrat or a rhino, you have got to take out typically through splintering, division, right? Divide and conquer. You have to take out the Maha movement, and in particular, you have to take out the nominal leader that actually coined the term Maha. This is kind of akin to Nigel Farage and UKIP and Brexit, politically speaking. So Bobby is that person that coined the term, and he may not have invented the logic behind it, but he certainly packaged it, captured it, and developed it as a political strategic position. So Bobby has got to be taken out for a number of reasons. And in general, he's got to be taken out, and the Maha initiative, grassroots movement, has to be splintered and divided. And ideally, from a Machiavellian standpoint, one would wish to divide Bobby and Maha from Trump and MAGA. They come from different places. Maha basically comes from the left, so does Bobby. Remember, he was Democrat. His pitch as an independent candidate was he was representing Kennedy Democrats, talking about the positions prior to Johnson's New Deal, but post Roosevelt's. So in that kind of time frame of the 60s, when he matured politically with his uncle and his father. So he's coming from that space. He's hearkening back to that, and that's really the roots of much of Make America Healthy Again. Whereas the roots of Trumpism and Make America Great Again absolutely come from the right, kind of a outgrowth of the Tea Party movement, in my opinion. So the D's have got an opportunity to capture Senate and House in the next election. And they are totally focused on that. And as a party, they tend to be cohesive in terms of messaging and strategy and talking points. So now let's map that reality into what the Kabuki theater that we just saw deployed. So what you saw was a lot of speaking to the base, to activate the base, the Democrat base, and I can tell you there a bunch of them are fired up. I haven't had this much hate coming at me on social media for quite a while now. So that's a good barometer, because I am one of these surrogates. If you don't just want to hate on Bobby, you want to hate on Bobby and Robert Malone. I guess I should be honored. If that's your kind of target to do that. So there's riling up the base. Then there is also a kind of consistent campaign that precedes this by months. If you follow the nuanced literature and like MedPage Today and things like that, kind of the third tier literature relating to the pharmaceutical industry, one of the messages that's been coming out again and again, and you can infer why based on the kinds of journals that it's coming out in, is that Bobby wants to be president. And Maha Action are actually his campaign fundraising arm to challenge MAGA and to grab the podium, metaphorically, from Donald Trump. So there's a lot of targeting of trying to drive a wedge between Maha and MAGA and between Trump and Bobby as representing those two. And this really came to a head at the beginning. Really, it started with Trump's challenge to Pfizer specifically last Sunday when he dropped this Truth Social post in which he, I'm going to paraphrase, said, you guys are tearing the CDC apart. You need to stop doing that. Pfizer, you've given me, again, I'm paraphrasing, happy talk, told me that these are fantastic products. They have no problems. And yet half of the people I talk to are telling me otherwise. And so I don't know what's true and what isn't true. Pfizer, you've shown me all this great data. Show it to the rest of the world right now, openly and transparently, so that they can assess this. And of course, they will become as convinced as I am, is the implication. So the response to that, so that happened, that dropped Sunday, then we had Labor Day on Monday, and then on Tuesday, first working day, you had the CEO of Pfizer, Bourla, coming out with this messaging that Operation Warp Speed was a roaring success and Trump should get the Nobel Prize. So this has become the new litmus test. Should Trump get the Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed? And everybody has to genuflect to that. And you heard, so that the origins of that message, the first deployment of that as a PsyWar strategy was from the Pfizer CEO. But then if you listen to the testimony, about 4 times, you had that from the senators. You had Bourla's messaging repeated. So it was one of the major themes. And there was a point at which Kennedy was confronted and forced to acknowledge, basically, it was a statement of fealty, that he also believed that President Trump should receive the Nobel Prize for Operation Warp Speed and the creation of the vaccines implied, despite the fact that the Nobel Prize Committee already gave the Nobel Prize to Carrico and Weissman for the development of this specific vaccine, not for the technology. Okay, so there's that. That's all about trying to drive a wedge between the president and the secretary. Then there's
and again, this is why Trump is wanting some kind of peace in the Middle East and Russia, Ukraine, and then he can get a Nobel Prize for that instead.
Yeah, well, the pain point there, if you look at it from that kind of frame of reference, is Obama got one. Why didn't he?
Yeah,
and that is absolutely a pain point. So it's not fair. So as if the Karolinska and the Nobel Selection Committee was fair, I speak as someone who has a conflict of interest on that topic. So another thread that ran all the way through that testimony and questioning related to rural hospitals. It was in the opening statements from the ranking subcommittee member. Okay, why this emphasis on rural hospitals, this obsession about rural hospitals, especially in the face of the big, beautiful bill, or whatever the counter narrative is for it, having 50 billion, that's with a B, US dollars. I don't forget what the exchange rate is now with pounds, but that's a lot of money, I think, in anybody's pocket.
Probably 35 billion UK.
Yeah, that are being committed to rural hospitals.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're banging on about rural hospitals, but big, beautiful bill hasn't even been implemented yet. But the Democrats are attacking the Republicans because of the collapse of rural health hospitals and rural hospital funding. And if you think through, if you just take a moment to process that, what's going on is that their collapse has been triggered by the policies over the last administration, the last 4 years, and the new bolus of money to save them has yet to land. But it's been allocated. Okay, so why are they making such a big deal about rural hospitals repeatedly, again and again and again, including my senator here from the state of Virginia? And the answer is that another wedge that's been identified in the electorate for Donald Trump is the rural farming communities, which have consistently, by Trump's own words, voted for the president through his 3 elections. Okay, so that's another key component of his base, and they're trying to wedge that off. They're trying to split that off by making all these assertions that the nasty Republicans are cutting Medicaid, Medicare, and are the ones responsible for driving the rural hospitals into insolvency, when in fact what's really going on is that the big money that has invested in the American hospital system doesn't see the upside in dropping cash into rural hospitals because they're not profitable, which is why they need subsidies. And of course, the sticking point in particular there is Mrs. Smith's baby, and whether in rural Virginia she is able to deliver her baby in a hospital environment as opposed to some home delivery or other options, nurse, midwife, or whatever. So that's, again, if you step back, look at what's going on. This is all about the midterms. It's all about splitting the base. It's all about dividing Trump from Bobby. And then overlying that is the perceived threat of Secretary Kennedy to the entire pharmaceutical industry. And so you have that narrative superimposed. And so you hear this kind of targeting, and really very weaponized misstatements, I'll say. The term was repeatedly tossed around, lies, concerning Bobby's intent and the operational aspects of the ACIP, which is why I got mentioned there, together with my colleague Retzef Levy, because we are at the tip of the spear in the ACIP, in particular in the COVID subcommittee working group. And so the thing that really triggered all of this was and the CDC resignations, and I mean the news cycle on CDC is measured in hours now. It's no longer days or weeks, and so those resignations were largely triggered because after 7 weeks of slow walking and obstructionism, we finally, with Retzef at the lead, managed to get through a document and an authorization that has the obscure bureaucratic terms of reference. I would call it a scope of work that defines what it is we're going to be doing in the COVID working group subcommittee in terms of investigating the safety and effectiveness of these products and the long-term effects, et cetera, et cetera. And so that term of reference document got published, and that plus the formal authorization, which I believe the secretary had to intervene on because the then director, no longer, of the CDC was blocking the authorization of that. And the backstory there was basically that the existing CDC staff, particularly in the Vaccine Safety Office, were taking the position that it was the bureaucracy that should be able to determine the scope of what ACIP and the working subgroup were allowed to look at. And basically taking the position that if the CDC had already done an assessment, say, of safety and efficacy, that we didn't have the right to go to anybody else, say the FDA or the UK or the Danish government or I don't want to get myself in trouble, but various other sources of rigorous data. And the CDC has taken the position that, once again, I mean, in their opening statements, I'm right on the line here, what I should say. But the position of the agency has been, we are the best. And frankly, as Bobby pointed out in his testimony, that is just no longer supportable. Just yesterday, they dropped the finding that infant mortality in the United States is up. We're having clearly worse outcomes than Europe. So good on you, relatively speaking, at the NHS, et cetera, relative to United States healthcare systems, particularly when calibrated based on expenditure. If you look at basically what do you get for your buck, we're way down in the cellar compared to Europe and pretty much every single other industrialized country. And Bobby made the point that that's CDC's responsibility. That's what they're supposed to be avoiding. That's what they're supposed to be mitigating. That's what they're supposed to be managing. It's the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Duh. And clearly they're not preventing or controlling disease. We had worse outcomes for COVID than anybody else in the Western world. If you believe the data, that's a whole nother topic of discussion. But that's that disclosure of that working group terms of reference or scope of work, that and the authorization that the working subcommittee would be able to access what had previously been unapproved sources of information from the CDC, that was taking the position, if it's not in our databases and it isn't our conclusion, then it is irrelevant and invalid. So that's why we get to the position that the only adverse event associated with these products is myocarditis. And we can unpack that in terms of the nuance of how that comes to be. But those are the main threads that ran through that. And once you kind of look at it from the 40,000-foot view, what's really going on here, then all of this fireworks and talking over people and the contrast, the very stark contrast between those Republican senators that were basically talking about the mechanics. When is this thing that we all agreed was going to be done? When is it going to get done? What about this particular clause or this bill that we have pending? Will you support me on that? That kind of mechanics is what the committee hearing was supposed to be about, but it was converted into political theater because of these other initiatives. Divide Trump, do anything you can to divide the Maha and Maha from MAGA, delegitimize anybody questioning the COVID approved narrative, drive a wedge between Trump and rural voters, and the specific target, as laid out by the bio industry in a leaked memo, was to get Bobby fired by the end of September. Hence, on Saturday last, we had this huge array of press articles coordinated with Senator Grassley and others calling for Trump to fire Bobby. So you had this, kind of, once again, when you see a coordinated media message coming out from tens to hundreds of outlets that is very much aligned, all in a very short time span, that's a clear indicator that there's an outside force that's influencing that messaging. So that's what's going on now. And unfortunately for their side, they chose as an initial spokesman an interesting character that was head of the vaccine safety group at CDC. First name Dmitry Dosolakis, I think is the way you pronounce his last name. who was hired under Rochelle Walensky during the Biden administration from public health in New York City to be basically her COVID whisperer, to advise her on things COVID. So if you liked what Rochelle Walensky had to say, which was a series of unsupported claims and positions and shutting down schools, et cetera, Dimitri's your man. And if you also liked the monkeypox policies, including the advocacy for universal monkeypox vaccination using a vaccine that was designed for smallpox, once again, Dimitri's the guy that was behind that. He was appointed to be the monkeypox czar by Biden and the White House. So this character resigns and he starts attacking Bobby, saying he's politicized the CDC. Through my eyes, in the basically the inciting event for his resignation was the approval of the terms of reference for the ACIP COVID working group. So that plus the firing of his boss and apparently protector, who is the newly confirmed director of the CDC, were the inciting events for his resignation. And then he went on a press tour, color me shocked, including at ABC News, big, long interview in which he made all kinds of claims about, as by the way, has the former director of the CDC. This is another thing that came out during the testimony, is she made assertions that Bobby flatly denied and said, I never had a private meeting with her. This shows how smart Bobby was. And at every meeting I had with her, I had witnesses, and they will all testify that that didn't occur. She's lying. Okay, so likewise with Dimitri, he made a series of claims about what was going on and that Bobby is politicizing this. But to any objective person or anybody kind of that was in first person interaction with this stream of events, the person doing the politicization is the gentleman. So that all comes out on ABC News, and that's fed into the news cycle with these 100 plus reports, all calling for Bobby's resignation, rationale, because he's politicized the science. And not listening to these scientists. Well, epidemiologists with MPHs are not scientists. Okay, they're not trained scientifically. They're trained in statistical analysis. They're trained in many things, but fundamental science and scientific rigor, hypothesis testing, not so much. There's some of that in epidemiology, but I would not consider an NPH a rigorous scientist. It's a 3-year degree, and you don't even have to have taken biology, let alone medicine.
Well,
so,
can I ask you two other part? Because I think Bobby Kennedy went from being utterly exasperated to confused at what he was being asked. But you mentioned one part earlier, which was President Trump basically calling on the pharmaceutical companies to justify the success of the COVID products.
Particularly Pfizer.
Yeah, but then another part of this picture, this pushback, was Joseph Ladapo, the Surgeon General in Florida.
Like I said, the news cycle has just been wicked.
I know, but tell us about that whole thing, because again, in the UK, we don't have mandated vaccines. In many parts of Europe, you do, and he is calling for not just COVID, not just MDA, but actually all.
So, it is now the policy under Ron DeSantis for the state of Florida, the governor of the state of Florida, because the structure in the United States, unlike the UK, is by constitution. The federal government does not have the right to regulate the practice of medicine. It vests with the states. It has to do with the Commerce Clause and the way the Constitution is structured. If powers are not vested specifically to the federal government in the U.S. Constitution, then they flow to the states. And so the FDA gets its authority to regulate under the Interstate Commerce Clause. You can't sell drugs or milk or beef across state lines without the endorsement of the U.S. federal government. So states have the right to regulate the practice of medicine. and they can follow the lead of the CDC in establishing standard of care is the term that's used legally, or not. They can vary from that. And this is one, this was another nuance that I celebrated, is the response to the retirement of the prior ACIP and the appointment of the new ACIP members, of which I'm one, by the particularly the western states of Washington, Oregon, and California, we would call the left coast, was in some other states was basically, well, if they're going to do that, we're just going to make our own rules for what is standard of care for vaccines. To which my reaction was, hallelujah, amen, states' rights, go for it. And so they're kind of caught in a conundrum where they're saying, well, we're going to go independently of the federal government, functionally, in establishing standard of care for vaccines in our states. And then kind of Ron DeSantis, brilliant, I don't know if he was aware of what he was doing, but he basically said, yeah, us too. But we're going to go the other direction from you. The left coast is all going, jab them, more and more mandates, jab the kids, etc. And Ron DeSantis is going basically aligned with Bobby, completely aligned with Bobby and his positions all the way through is, I'm not going to take anybody's vaccine away, but I'm against vaccine mandates, which, by the way, according to Merriam-Webster's dictionary, meets the technical criteria of being an anti-vaxxer. So now Joe Ladapo and Ron DeSantis are anti-vaxxers for sure, because they are against vaccine mandates. And you may recall, since you're such an avid reader of my Substack, my recent essay that kind of was along the lines of, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, in which I made the point that ethics are not science. And there are fundamentals to medical ethics that have to do with patient rights, and those include autonomy and the need for informed consent. And I argue that the state does not have the right to impose medical procedures on its citizens. Now, most of public health disagrees. And there's a precedent case that the Supreme Court cited back when there was this attempted to be litigated that goes back to Revolutionary War era with a smallpox outbreak in one of the coastal cities on the East Coast that basically said that the state does have the right to impose vaccination. And so that was the precedent, from way back in the 1700s that was cited to justify what was done under COVID. And then there's been kind of pecking away at that. But I'm of the firm, unyielding opinion that the foundations of medical ethics dictate that the state does not have the right to mandate an invasive medical procedure on its citizens. But the majority of public health disagrees.
And finally, tell me about where the ACIP, or the Vaccine Advisory Group, really, for UK viewers, how does that fit into this huge storm?
So careful what you wish for. Being a member to this thing, and yeah, so we're kind of the tip of the spear. From where I sit, in my point of view as being a committee member, the FDA is making decisions that are, talking about politicizing. The FDA is making decisions in favor of various products that reflect industry pressure and political pressure. And they're making statements such as, which, by the way, the criteria that, if you listen to the Democrats yesterday, the sky is falling and there's going to be mass widespread death of children starting tomorrow, uh, particularly from COVID, because the nasty Bobby Kennedy took away their shots. But if you, as we are doing, maybe I'm out of school in saying that, but one might imagine that the ACIP might look at the policies that are existing for COVID vaccination in adolescents and children in European nation states that have arguably much better monitoring systems than what the CDC has. Not for lack of trying, but in socialized medicine, with the policies that exist in Northern Europe and the UK, you've got a lot better data access than we have because of the various restrictions we have here in the United States. The Health Information Portability Act, HIPAA, and other things. So we just don't have the liberty that, say, the Danes do to data mine the comprehensive integrated database of all Danes historically, right? I mean, it's, throughout their entire life, they've got all these incredible medical records because of how the system's structured. So it's informative, or it could be informative, I'll say, to look at what, for instance, Denmark and the UK define as high-risk groups for COVID, and as indications for child and adolescent vaccination for COVID as high-risk groups. And then you might turn around and say, dear FDA, you have authorized these products for high-risk, anybody with a single high-risk indication, things that would put them at high risk for severe COVID. Please disclose to us what those are and what the data are to support those conclusions, because you did give it to the public when you made these decisions. So the ACIP is now in the position of, and it always has been, of being between the FDA and the public and the pediatricians and the primary care docs, et cetera, that give out vaccines. And so the FDA can say, oh, this is approved for marketing for these indications. But the ACIP is the one that is supposed to, in the structure of things, advise the director of the CDC, that's all we do, about what we think should be the indications for use for any newly authorized vaccine from the FDA. So that's the food chain. And then once the director says yay or nay, or I'm going to go my own way, and makes a statement about public policy, federal policy, endorsing this or that vaccine schedule, then it historically gets propagated through the professional organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics. By the way, all of them are heavily compromised by pharmaceutical industry dollars. I'm sure that's just random benevolence on the part of the pharmaceutical industry. No implications there about cause and effect. And they then propagate things down through as recommendations, and that becomes standard of care across the United States. What does that mean, standard of care? Legally in the United States, if you're a doc and you do something off-label or different from standard of care and something bad happens, you can be sued, unlike the pharmaceutical companies in the case of vaccines. So then, and the same goes with the pharmacies that have been giving out vaccines. So suddenly, the sphincter tension on both the pharmacies, big chain pharmacies, and the administering physicians has gotten really tight, and they are not so willing to do this because they no longer have the liability protection in the same way. And so that's what translates to all the yap on the Hill about, Bobby, you have restricted vaccine access. Well, no, he didn't. But indirectly, you can make that case functionally. But that's not his fault. It's just the way the system is. So that's where ACIP sits in this food chain. Those are the tensions and the pressures that are on it. And historically, the FDA is rather arrogant. It's constrained by confidentiality for the data it receives from the pharmaceutical industry. So it's not at liberty to just share with the public. And we saw this with the Pfizer papers, where there was the effort to sequester the adverse event information that had been submitted to the FDA for decades, and eventually got overturned by the courts. But the justification was, well, this is proprietary business information. And we don't own it. The government doesn't own it. It's owned by the pharmaceutical manufacturer. So then that's what throws the CDC into the position of having to independently gather data on adverse events and effectiveness, which turns out to be a really naughty problem in the Gordian sense, relative to what Northern Europeans would generally say, oh yeah, we just, write a little computer algorithm and out comes the data. It doesn't work that way in the States. So we got a bunch of distributed, differentiated databases that have, they have to be de-identified if they're going to be shared, and their structure in terms of coding and the database structure aren't aligned. So you got to have these tools that bring them into alignment so that you can do analysis. And then some of them are owned by Centers for Medicaid and Medicare services. Some of them are owned by the DoD. Some of them are owned by the large HMOs. So it's just a great big splintered mess. So the CDC, to their credit, they do their best they can in a really difficult situation. Some might say that they could do better. And some might say that they might switch to more of a risk-based analysis rather than a retrospective data-based analysis. But that's in the future.
Well, Robert, it's been a busy week. Appreciate your time. And of course, the 10 most important letters for any of the viewers and listeners to follow what is happening and keep abreast is malone.news on the Substack. Those 10 letters will get you into Robert's head and what's happening from the American Association of Pediatrics, fantastic cross-post article, or Dominic Frisby, great comedian, new video that's out, been a previous guest with us, and of course, what's happening on the farm there with you and Jill. So always appreciate you coming on, Robert. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and I hope you have a great weekend.